Hello, I am Peter Okwache. Welcome to Focus on Africa. Our top stories. Hundreds of unexplained deaths in northern Nigeria. Officials say early findings show no link to COVID-19. So, why so many?
We have never seen anything like this, not since the major cholera outbreak that our parents have told us about. That was 60 years ago.
Huge tailbacks on the Kenya-Uganda border as lorry drivers are tested for the coronavirus. Also on the program, we're looking at the technology being developed across Africa to help fight the pandemic, including an innovation by South African doctors to protect health workers around the world.
You will bring the coronavirus home and then infect everyone.
And how one movie maker is using his skills to help kids understand COVID-19. Thanks for joining us here on Focus on Africa from BBC World News. The Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari has ordered a 2-week total lockdown in the northern state of Kano after grave diggers said they were burying an unusually high number of bodies. Mr. Buhari has expressed deep concern over the deaths and has sent in a team of investigators. Kano State, one of the most heavily populated in Nigeria, has one of the highest coronavirus infection rates in the country. But authorities say the deaths are not related to COVID-19. Here's our Nigeria correspondent, Chichi Izundo.
From these graves, whispers of rumours started. Grave diggers who said they'd noticed a higher than normal number of burials.
No, we have never seen anything like this, not since the major cholera outbreak that our parents have told us about. That was 60 years ago. They told us at that time they used to run away from the dead bodies, but they will still be called to bury the dead.
Kano has been in lockdown due to coronavirus for almost 2 weeks. Private healthcare centres, which provide more than half of all healthcare in the state, have closed. Testing for COVID-19 started in mid-April, but it's now been suspended for almost a week after the contamination of a laboratory. Once fumigated, officials hope to have it up and running. The rumoured deaths of around 640 people over the last week has shocked the medical community. Deaths aren't registered here, so it's not easy to find out why people are dying. But Nigeria's Centre for Disease Control has sent a 17-strong enhanced support team to start taking verbal autopsies, contact trace those who've been around positive cases and implement steps to contain the spread of COVID-19, or to try and stop Kano becoming the next epicentre. Authorities say early reports show the deaths could have been caused by complications around diabetes, acute malaria, meningitis or hypertension, but it's not coronavirus.
Was that the count of the death is alarming, and the number of it could be not unconnected to the coronavirus pandemic, and it might likely be due to the shutdown of private hospitals. There are a lot of hypertensive patients, diabetic patients, asthmatic patients, cancer patients, and they have no much access to the hospitals because the lockdown affects everybody.
Preparations are underway to treat the rising number of cases. Officials, however, are asking for time to investigate and time to contain the spread of the virus. But as cases across Nigeria continue to increase, time is a luxury few can afford. Chichi Izundo, BBC News.
Massive tailbacks up to 40 kilometers long are building at the Kenya-Uganda border as mandatory coronavirus testing is carried out. The Kenyan government officials decided to test all long-distance lorry drivers trying to cross the border after Uganda confirmed that 8 Kenyan drivers had tested positive for the virus. It can take up to 6 hours for the drivers and passengers to be cleared to continue. The BBC's Ferdinand Omondi reports from Kenya's capital, Nairobi.
It's a nightmare for the truck drivers and for people living on the Kenyan side of the border. These trucks are occupying one half of the road all the way from the Malaba border, crossing as far as Bungoma town, 40 kilometers away. Every day, up to 500 trucks join the queue because of a new law that requires every driver and any colleagues in the vehicle to be tested for the coronavirus before crossing into Uganda.
I pass here every week and I have never seen anything like this. We drivers work very hard to build East Africa, but have a lot of problems. I just want them to open up this jam. Have many medics on the road testing the drivers.
The mass testing became mandatory in Kenya when some drivers tested positive for coronavirus after crossing into Uganda. But now they say they have to wait for about 3 days in this queue before getting tested. Locals are worried some drivers could potentially spread the virus because as they wait, they freely mingle in the shopping centers and villages in search of supplies, accommodation and company.
We are appealing to the entire public that as they engage with these people, they must keep distance, ensuring that they have put on masks and then wash their hands. Because I'm sure they have to sell their commodities. But as they do so, they must adhere to the guidelines that are provided by the Ministry of Health.
Truck drivers are classified as an essential service, delivering millions of dollars worth of goods to the landlocked countries of Uganda and Rwanda. But the Kenyan and Ugandan governments have identified them as a high-risk group following the spike in positive cases. The port of Mombasa, where these trucks begin their journey, has also seen an increase in the number of people testing positive.
We don't know how the disease may spread. Maybe through a piece of paper. It could be through money changing hands with someone who has coronavirus. Perhaps the best solution is to close the port of Mombasa.
Kenya's Ministry of Health said it was sending more medical personnel and testing kits to the Uganda border to increase the speed of testing. For both countries, the focus for now is stopping the drivers spreading the virus. Ferdinand Omondi, BBC, Nairobi.
Let's take a quick look now at other stories making headlines across Africa and the rest of the world. A presidential candidate and former rebel leader in Ivory Coast, Guillaume Soro, has been sentenced to 20 years in jail for corruption. He was also fined more than $7 million. The trial was boycotted by Mr. Soro's lawyers, who said the allegations against him were political and aimed at excluding him from this year's presidential poll. Mr. Soro was accused of using public money to buy a house in Abidjan. A third batch of medical donations from the Chinese billionaire Jack Ma has arrived on the continent. The 4.6 million face masks, 500,000 swabs, test kits and other equipment will be distributed across Africa to help countries fight coronavirus. Ma, the founder of Alibaba, China's biggest e-commerce platform, already made 2 similar donations in March and earlier this month. The postponed Tokyo Olympics will be scrapped if they can't take place in 2021. That's according to Games chief Yoshiro Mori. The Games have been rescheduled to run from the 23rd of July to the 8th of August next year due to coronavirus. But health experts doubt it's a good idea without an effective vaccine or drugs in circulation. He doesn't think, Mr. Mori doesn't think the Games could be moved again till 2022. The coronavirus pandemic is having a devastating effect on healthcare systems around the world, and keeping frontline workers safe is a priority for everyone. Adapting and developing technology is key to that. And in a moment, we'll be looking at some of the work up and down across Africa. But first, the BBC's Vumana Mkize reports on a team of doctors in South Africa who have designed a device, the Intubox, that could save lives.
I'm at the Charlotte Maxeke Academic Hospital in Johannesburg, home to many medical healthcare practitioners who are at the forefront of fighting the COVID-19 epidemic. Now, an innovation that has come out of the hospital is the Intubox, which allows healthcare practitioners to safely intubate patients and reducing the risk of COVID exposure. The Intubox is the brainchild of Dr. Feroza Mutara, along with a team of doctors at the hospital. The Perspex box is placed over a patient, creating an airtight seal, and has access points that allow doctors to work inside.
The InjuBox doesn't take away from using basic protective equipment. You still have to dress up and wear the protective equipment that we normally do. All the InjuBox does is provide an additional significant layer of protection to the staff that are working closely with the patient in that circumstance.
The privately funded InjuBox is designed and manufactured by a team of engineers at the Paramount Group.
And what I love about innovation in Africa is that we are very good at finding simple solutions to complex problems.
The aerospace company usually makes fighter jets and helicopters, but is now using its expertise to protect frontline healthcare workers.
And I think that the world has to treat the fight against this virus as if it were a wartime situation. And not only ourselves, but many defense and aerospace companies around the world are very quickly adjusting their production, very quickly adjusting their capability to create simple technologies, because not all the solutions that we need to fight this virus are complicated solutions, but they need to be done quickly. There's no time for paralysis by analysis, and the defense industry is one of the most suitable industries to adjust production quickly, and that's what we're doing here.
There's a critical shortage of personal protective equipment in the country. Despite recent purchases, nearly 100 million masks and gloves are still needed. The PPE shortage has galvanized South Africa's 3D printing community into action. Universities and schools around the country are making face shields by the thousands and are donating them to frontline workers.
It's a world crisis. We're using our technology to solve real-life problems. We always preach that to our learners, and I think this was just a perfect opportunity to put these 21st century learning tools to the test.
Healthcare workers are especially vulnerable to COVID-19 infection due to the nature of their work. For those on the front line, the more PPE they receive, the more lives they can save. Vumani Mkize, BBC News, Johannesburg.
Well, it's that point on universities that we'd like to look at now, because across the world, institutions have responded positively, intensifying research to find solutions and assisting their governments in developing ways to contain the pandemic. Let's now speak to Professor Tawana Kupe, Vice-Chancellor of the University of Pretoria in South Africa. Professor, have we seen any tangible results due to these research being taken up across the continent?
Good evening and good evening to your viewers. Yes, we have. I think universities have come to the party in a very big way. I mean, if you talk, your clip just spoke about 3D, the use of 3D technologies. At least 4 or 5 universities, including the University of Pretoria, the University of Stellenbosch, Makerere, Wits University, have used innovative technologies, for example, to manufacture personal protective equipment. At UP, we printed visa frames. At Stellenbosch University, they print the actual visas, and at Wits, face shields and breathing equipment, and the same at the University of Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. What you can see here, despite the limited resources, and despite the history of us not being able to be proactive, responsive to global health and local health challenges, is a different scenario going forward. This extends also to modeling and data analysis and data gathering. A number of universities, 4 among the top universities, are doing modeling of the pandemic, collecting real-time data and disseminating. Those are universities like the University of Pretoria, the University of Cape Town, Addis Ababa University, and others. Dashboards from Wits University that can model infections in local areas in real time to inform evidence-based decision making.
Okay, Professor, I guess across the world right now, the race is to find a new vaccine for the coronavirus or for COVID-19. Is there any work being done about this on the continent?
Absolutely. I think at the top end, the leading universities, at least 6 universities are doing research to support vaccine development. And some of this research is actually done in conjunction with the World Health Organization. The University of Pretoria is involved in a multi-center clinical viral trial, for example, that the results would aid to the efforts to find a vaccine. The University of Ghana, as you know, had a world first, the first time sequencing of the genome of the coronavirus. And so has the Addis Ababa University also been involved in similar efforts, Makerere University and Nairobi University, as well as the University of Pretoria, have studies around the transmission of coronaviruses from birds to human beings. All of that might not be a direct clinical trial of a vaccine, but it is the fundamental science you need in order to take the next step. As you know, globally.
Yes, Professor. And since we're on the matter of vaccines at the moment, I mean, there's been a lot of talk about any potential vaccine being trialed out in Africa first. What do you make of that?
Well, I think that is not a problem as long as the following happens. One, that the necessary ethical approvals and ethical procedures and practices are followed at the global standard, the peer reviews and all of that. What you don't want on the continent is what was recorded from 2 French doctors suggesting that it might be actually be better to do it down in Africa, as if we were dispensable human beings. If all of the protocols that good science and ethical and moral science follows, there is no harm in including African populations among the first group of people to have clinical trials.
And there's an argument also across the continent, and it's one I've seen on social media in recent days, that our traditional healers should also be involved in finding a cure or a solution to COVID-19. What do you make of that?
I mean, there are active compounds in certain plants that our traditional healers have historically used that could contribute to creating a vaccine. What is needed, and which many universities, including mine, the University of Pretoria, is to bridge the gap through transdisciplinary forms of knowledge. Universities hold scientific knowledge that we have done in a particular traditional way, but forms of knowledge or indigenous knowledge can exist with traditional healers. What you need to do is to combine these forms of knowledge in a transdisciplinary approach, but be able to develop the kind of protocols that ensure that whatever herbs, medicinal plants are done, do not do any harm to any community or to any individuals. Every effort must be brought to actually address this pandemic. No single forms of knowledge is going to deal with such a complex virus and such a complex problem.
Okay, Professor Tawana Kupe, the Vice-Chancellor of the University of Pretoria, thank you very much for your insight into this topic. Now, later in the program, we'll be looking at how engineering students in Tunisia are using their skills to make a difference. This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News with me, Peter Okwoche. Still to come,
It will bring the coronavirus home.
how one movie maker is using his skills to help kids understand COVID-19. Welcome back to Focus on Africa. I am Peter Okwoche. Now, with a global shortage of masks as well as ventilators in the fight against coronavirus, people have been helping to plug the gap in their local markets. In Tunisia's coastal town of Sousse, engineering students are using innovative technology to do just that. James Cowling reports.
We are using 3D printing technology to make masks for protection against the novel coronavirus.
Taha is one of 6 students at the National School of Engineering who is using technology to fight COVID-19.
The idea came from the director of the engineering school in Sousse. My friend and I started working to produce masks and distribute them to hospitals here in Tunisia to give them what they need. To print one mask, it takes an hour and a half. So we designed another model that uses laser technology. And we went from an hour and a half to prepare a mask to 2 minutes.
The new mask was approved by 6 medical and engineering institutes, which are overseeing the project. So far, the team has made 2,500 masks and now average 300 a day.
We have been here for a week now. This is where we eat, drink, and do everything, and even sleep. We entertain each other because we are friends and we are close to each other.
The team has also helped design a prototype device for high-flow nasal oxygen therapy for patients with breathing issues. Taha hopes the team's work can help Tunisia cope better with the pandemic.
Our country's resources are a little weak, so it is our duty as students of engineering to try and cover these needs. You feel like you are doing something that you need to do, and at the same time you're working in a field you're passionate about and that is helpful to your country.
Now, one of the biggest issues facing parents during this coronavirus pandemic is how to explain what's happening to little kids. How about through animation then? That's what Ni Akimolayan, one of Nigeria's biggest movie directors, decided to do. We had a chat earlier and he told me about the inspiration behind it. But first, let's have a quick look at a clip of his work.
Habib, where do you think you're going?
Stay out of my way. I'm going to play football with my friends, and there's nothing you can...
Silence! You think this is funny, eh? You can get the deadly coronavirus.
We just noticed that, there had been lots of information out there, but nobody was talking to the kids. Most importantly, no one was explaining to the kids why the lockdown was necessary. And I thought it was just important to do something because I have a 5-year-old myself, and I struggled to explain to him why, we weren't going to schools, why we weren't going to the movies, and the likes. So it was just basically a need to help explain the information so that kids, parents, won't have to stress over doing too much talking with their kids.
It's a very clever way of talking to children because normally, when you see animations or cartoons like this for kids, it's actually, playthings. Thomas the Tank Engine comes to mind, Tom and Jerry comes to mind. But this is something scary you're telling them about, but in a way that they will understand and not be too scared.
Yeah, I mean, it was important to, for my kid, I realized that even at that age, I mean, he's 5, they understand the concept of a monster, right? I mean, they don't think about monsters as things that will kill them. They think about them as things that will scare them and will make them hide. And I figured because monsters are so relatable with kids, especially the way we use them, in animation, I can use the virus as a monster. And because kids also like to, defeat monsters, it's important to say the things they can use to defeat the monsters, hence the hand washing. But it was also important to make it funny, to make it very relatable. It's a young, stubborn little brother trying to go out to play football, and then there is the sister who tries to be adult about it. So it was, once I understood that those were the key things that needed to, and of course I had my child to test with, then it was easier to pull off. We've seen people voice it in French, so it's been airing in places like Côte d'Ivoire and the likes. We've seen people revoice in Swahili, so it's been airing in places like, in East African countries. Last week, we had a surprise. A popular Brazilian politician put it up on her page, and with Portuguese subtitles. I think that the proudest bit for me is that in a time like this, where we need to constantly put out information to Black kids, in animation, it's never been seen or done before, are the ones talking to everyone all over the world, And as far as the parents are concerned, the feedback has been amazing.
Mommy will be sick, no more jollof rice.
Huh?
Daddy will be sick, no more going out to see movies.
Oh no!
I think the most common feedback, which is the one I like to talk about, is parents keep telling me that once the kids are done watching the video, they go wash their hands. And because of that, they're running out of soap because kids won't stop watching over and over again.
Great idea, isn't it? That's Nigerian movie director Akin Akimolayan. That's it, Ni Akimolayan, beg your pardon. That's it on Focus on Africa for today. Thanks for watching. See you again soon. Bye.